Good morning. First, thank you to all of you who evidently shared or talked about my worship service yesterday, and comments and text messages and everything. Greatly appreciated. Thank you for all of that care. Today, as we combine yesterday and today's readings of Genesis, it's 6 chapters, 33 through 35 for yesterday and 36 through 38 for today. I don't know if we'll get through all of that, but we'll see what happens. But as we ended Saturday, Jacob had wrestled with God. His hip had been put out of joint, and he would, the next morning, chapter 33 starts out, it's the next day. Jacob looks up and he sees Esau coming. So he divides the children among Leah and Rachel and their maids, and he sets them in order with the maids front, and then Leah and her children, and then Rachel with Joseph, and then, where they had all gone across the river before him, and he had spent the night on the other side of the river, and that's when he wrestled with God in chapter 32. Today, in verse 3, it says, he himself went on ahead of them, bowing himself to the ground 7 times till he came to his brother. So whereas, he had remained behind, for that first night, he was the one that led. He went and he met Esau, ahead of everybody else, so that if Esau, did something dastardly to Jacob, the others were all kind of lined up, and Rachel and Joseph at the rear would have been the safest. But Esau comes to him and greets him with a hug and a kiss with joy. The past is forgiven, forgotten. And again, that's a lesson for all of us, that things in the past belong in the past. And we need to work together and look ahead and go forward for the day. And so, Esau says to Jacob, "Who are all of these with you?" And Jacob said, "These are the children, the families that God has blessed me with. I have been very blessed by God." And Esau says, "You don't need to offer me, because I am wealthy and I have well established myself." And Esau says, "Let's journey together, and go back." And Jacob, while he is thankful for being graciously received and forgiven that way, says that, I need to travel at the same speed as the herds and the children, so that my herds and my herds of cattle and my flocks of sheep and everything survive, and the women and children aren't overly taxed. And so Esau says, let me leave some of my people with you. And then Esau returns home, and Jacob moves on, and he builds a house. Says he bakes booths for his cattle in a place called Sukkoth, and he built himself a house and cattle. And then Dinah, his daughter, is the daughter of Leah, goes out, and she is seen by Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, and this is one of those stories that's just brings tears to my eyes to think that this happened. But, she is basically raped by this man. And when his, Jacob's sons find out about it, they speak to him, and he and his whole family agree to be circumcised, to become like the Jews. And then we get to verse 25 of chapter 34. On the 3rd day, when they were still in pain, adult males being circumcised, if you have a surgery, you're down and out for a little bit. But these 2 brothers, Simeon and Levi, come against the city with swords and catch them unawares and kill them all. And just a terribly, terribly dastardly deed. And when Jacob finds out, he sends them on their way. And he says, "You have brought shame upon my household." And he sends them away. And they, well, should our sister be treated like a whore, and they were upset, rightly so, that their sister had been treated that way. And then chapter 30, that's the end of chapter 34. Now chapter 35 begins with God saying to Jacob, arise, go to Bethel and settle there and make an altar to me and put away the foreign gods. And as they journeyed, it says, a terror from God came upon all of the cities around them so that no one pursued them. No one bothered Jacob and his people as they journeyed through. He had the protection of God. He had the blessing of God. And we see that. And then in verse 8, it's in Deborah, Rachel's nurse, died and was buried, so she was the important part of the family that way. And then verse 9, God appears to Jacob, and he says, your name is Jacob, it shall no longer be that, but it will be Israel. And we had heard that, after the wrestling as well. It says, I am God Almighty, be fruitful and multiply. And they build a pillar and for worship, and they call that place Bethel. And then Rachel, the one that Jacob rather loved, and was the mother of Joseph, becomes pregnant again and bears a son, Benjamin, and she dies in childbirth and was buried on the way then to Ephraim, to Bethlehem. And Jacob set a pillar up at her grave. So this Benjamin is the 12th son now, born to Jacob. So we have the 12 tribes of Israel, the 12 males set in place. And, and it's just goes on. And then actually chapter 35 ends with, it says, now the days of Isaac were 180 years, and Isaac breathed his last, and he was died, and Esau and Jacob buried him. So Isaac, the father of Esau and Jacob, had seen his sons, come back together again before he died and was buried. Chapter 36, we hear of the genealogy, the descendants of Esau, and how he took wives and different children are born. And then verse 31 says, these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king of Israel, before any of the kings reigned over Israel. And so this is history that's written down, and there were, it's relating to us the kings and other leaders of the lands. Chapter 37 begins with Jacob settling in the land where his father had lived as an alien, the land of Canaan. This is the story of the family of Jacob. And so now it says Joseph being 17 years old. So this is, the firstborn son of Rachel, the woman he loved, that he worked so hard and diligently, 14 years for her hand in marriage. But Joseph was tending the flock. And verse 3, Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children. And in verse 5, Joseph has a dream. And, his brothers call him the dreamer. But in this dream, it shows, the interpretation is that the 10 older brothers bow down in worship to this Joseph, this younger, one. And it says, suddenly my sheaf rose and stood straight, and your sheaves gathered around it, bowed down. And then he has another dream of the sun and the moon and the stars bowing down to him again as well. And of course that dream, the interpretation is of Joseph rising to a time of a position of leadership, and his brothers coming and being subservient to him. And so verse 12 now is where we find some bad stuff coming up again. Joseph and his brothers went to pasture, and Israel said to Joseph, are your brothers not tending the flock at Shechem? I'm going to send you to them. Go and see how it is with your brothers and their flock, and bring back word to me. So as he got there, they saw him from a distance, and before he came, they conspired to kill him. Verse 38, or 18 rather. And they said to one another, here comes that dreamer, you know, and I'm sure it was a joyous, you know, it was, here comes that dreamer, you know, they were not impressed with him. So come now, let us kill him. But Reuben, one of the brothers, says, let's not take his life. Let's throw him into this pit in the wilderness so we don't kill him. And so when Joseph came, you know, they stripped him of his clothing and threw him into this pit. But then as they were sitting there eating, you know, they're saying, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to these Ishmaelites so that he might, you know, so that he can go on his way. He is our brother, our own flesh, and we don't really want to kill him. And so Reuben had been there when they threw him into the pit, and it was his intention to come back and to rescue his brother. But when he came back, Joseph wasn't in the pit, so he returned and said, my brother is gone, you know, and so they come to their father with Joseph's robe and show him the evidence that their brother has been eaten by wild animals. So that's the end of chapter 37. I guess we'll quit there for today. We've had a long, lengthy journey through things, and we'll pick up and add chapter 38 to tomorrow's readings. So may God richly bless you each and every day as he always does.